You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk 1150 AM. Now, back to the show with local mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell.
You are listening to The Money Hour on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, November 12th show. You can also listen to my show podcast, Facebook premiere, or you can catch my show on my show YouTube channel. I am your host, Tina Mitchell, and your local mortgage expert. I am here to help you build a strong financial blueprint 1 week and one show at a time. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. I'm here to answer any questions or connect you with the guests that I have on the show. You can reach out by going to themoneyhour.com. And now in studio, Rebekah Baze of CIC Consulting Group, Resale Certificates Made Simple, right here on 1150 AM KKNW. Rebekah, really excited to have you in studio for the first time because what you do is unique, and I don't know anyone else that has a company that provides the service that you provide. And that really came in you in creating this, seeing the need that there wasn't really anything out there. So first, can you explain what a resale certificate is?
Sure. With condominiums and now common interest community properties, when a seller goes to sell their property, they have to provide a buyer with a virtual stack of documents and financial statements and reserve studies and a bunch of statements that the state law requires the association tell the buyer about. So buyers get a stack of documents, and that's how they try to evaluate the health of the association.
And it is a big stack of documents we're going to talk a little bit about here today with you. But what are the big challenges that you see related to resale certs?
First and foremost is getting a complete resale certificate that complies with state law.
That's okay. We've got a little friend. We got a little friend visiting our virtual show. I love it.
Nice sound effect.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for bringing a special one in. So go ahead, Rebekah. So what are the biggest challenges that you see?
Biggest challenge number one is getting everything you're supposed to get, because the seller is obligated to provide things that the management company is supposed to give to them. And sometimes we get everything we should. Often we have to go back and say the financial statement is missing or the important document isn't here. That's really the first big challenge, is getting the correct documentation.
Yeah. And so why are resale certs so challenging?
There's a lot of layers of people involved. First and foremost, it's humans. Most management companies use some kind of document delivery service, and those services aren't specific to Washington state law. So not every management company's resale certificate report matches what the state law requires. If they don't have a box to check, they don't check a box. Therefore, it doesn't comply. That's a big reason. It's really humans. And then things like meeting minutes, somebody has to take meeting minutes, somebody has to send them to somebody has to put them in the system in order for them to get out. There's a lot of broken pieces in that chain of information.
And this is why your services and the company that you created around this is so important. And if you're listening to the show and you're getting a loan, you want to make sure that you have everything that you need and know that up front, so you're not dealing with challenges, and even worse, have things fall through when you're getting towards the end of the process. And Rebekah can absolutely help with that process. So Rebekah, what is the most important document a buyer should look at when considering buying a condo or not?
If I had to pick one, I would focus on the reserve study, although you really have to make sure you look at all the documents together. A reserve study is a point in time document. It was correct the day it was issued, and it may not be correct the next day if that position. But the reserve study is the biggest indicator of what the association is responsible to pay for during a certain time period. It's almost like a credit report. What are they obligated to do? When is it time to replace the roof? So I would focus on that just as an angle of, if you buy a unit in this property, you are going to have to pay for these things coming up.
Yes. And why is a reserve study so important, Rebekah?
It documents the condition of the property as well as the age of major components. So if you were to compare two reserve studies, you would maybe in two comparable properties, You would maybe want to buy a unit in a property that already has new windows, doors, and siding, as opposed to one that's projecting those need to be done in 5 years or 4 years or 10 years.
Yeah. And why are the reserve studies so challenging to understand?
There's a lot of different service providers, first and foremost. There's different levels of reserve studies. The association can ask for a good one or a really expensive one or the cheapest option out there. So there's a huge variation in service providers, which I also relate similar to if you have a vehicle and you want to get an oil change, you can go to Jiffy Lube or you can go to the dealer. And there's big variations in those costs, expenses, and quality of service. So reserve studies are similar. You can get a really good reserve study that's going to be more accurate or one that maybe isn't.
Yeah, it's just like any other industry. You have a discounted shop and you have a full service shop. Discounted shop equals discounted service. So you absolutely have to be careful there for sure. So can you talk on special assessments and why so many associations are using them?
Special assessments are common and they almost have to be. The cost of doing business, the cost of maintaining your property and keeping insurance and paying for utilities almost is getting to the point where it's getting harder and harder to raise dues to the level to accommodate those expenses. And then especially if a property is older and behind, there's no way to generate enough income in a short period of time to do things like roof replacements, major projects. So the biggest reason for special assessment is we're behind. We just didn't plan well enough ahead in the future. The second biggest is unplanned. Something happened and we didn't know about it. So you can't really do much about those. Those are acts of God or something failed sooner, which you would have had no way of knowing. But the ones where we know we have to do all this work in the future, but we're not going to put any money in our reserve account, those are going to end up with major special assessments.
Yeah. And what a nightmare that can be for a buyer. So how can a buyer avoid the risk of special assessments when considering a condo purchase?
First and foremost, let me help you. Absolutely. And that's a huge part of what we look at when I break down a resale certificate is the projections. What's coming? We can use history to inform us of what might happen. How do they behave? How have they behaved in the past? Are they doing projects? Have they done nothing? But going forward, it's really taking their current financial position, their projections for what their dues are going to be, and then the expenses and trying to line those up. And then for me, I look really closely at what's not in the picture. Yeah. What have they talked about that isn't in the reserve study? And what might be in the reserve study that I know is going to cost more than just the material cost that the reserve study illustrates.
Yeah, you don't want to get into a condo and then find out your payment's going to be another $800 a month because all of a sudden a special assessment's coming in and they're going to, take that out over a period of time, which is going to increase all of the owner's payment. So why it's so important in hiring someone like Rebekah to help you with that process so you can foresee what's coming up. It's kind of like why you get a home inspection. A home inspector is the inspector is going to let you know the condition of the home and also is going to help prepare on what things are going to be coming up in the future so that you don't have any surprises when you get into that property. So Rebekah, how many associations or resale certificates have you analyzed during your career?
I just told somebody the other day, I bet I've read 1,000 declarations.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so horrifying.
I know.
For me, I mean, I would absolutely need you.
But that's like maybe, that's how many declarations I read, but maybe all, breaking down all the resale certificates and including all the associations I have professional experience with in my 20 years, it's probably between 500 and 700.
Yeah, that is a lot. And what would you say percentage wise, Rebekah, in ones that you're looking at? Because you understand, because you do this so much, and a lot of the condos that are in our area, what's happening with them? How many times do you see that there are things and issues that are coming up that they're not providing what they need, or that really, if they don't have you, this could be devastating for the buyer?
I'd say probably 75% of the time, there's something in there that a buyer should really be aware of. I've probably had less than 5% of my clients, after doing a review, decide they don't want to proceed with the purchase based on what we uncover. Those tend to be people that know nothing and didn't look at anything.
Yeah.
Once we go through that process, they are thrilled because now we know what to look for. The next property they get under contract, they love and they're sold. So sometimes it takes once or twice to educate to find the right property. Generally speaking, there's always something. There's no perfect association. There's no perfect condominium. There's always something that isn't ideal. So and there's huge variance. So what I also do is focus with the buyer. What's most important to you? What kind of risk are you willing to take on? A roof project is different than a full strip and reclad and window replacement project. Yeah. So there's different variations and levels of risk that we try to identify, and they all have them.
It's when I talked with you, this is the first time in my 27 years career in the mortgage industry that I've ever talked to someone that does what you do. And why has this not just become a norm, like a home inspector? People, even in the market when people were paying hundreds of $1,000s over ask price and they were competing against 15 different offers, they were getting a pre-inspection. They were paying for that inspector prior to not even knowing if they were going to get a home, because they knew they couldn't get their offer accepted with an inspection contingency. So why haven't we seen that with condos? Because you're such an important part of the process. And I didn't even know anybody like you existed.
Well, I think that's your answer, is nobody existed until and I've been working now for about 2 years developing this service. And I tend to just work on referrals because then I have, a little bit better chance to succeed with a warm referral, especially from a broker I have a relationship with. But I think it's changing. I think it's growing. My business is definitely increasing. As more and more people learn about the service, it will grow. I expect to see competition at some point because it's an important aspect of any common interest community purchase. It's critical. Understand what you're buying.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about how your service assists with property buyers and real estate brokers.
Yes. So I help brokers because, of course, they're the ones trying to wrangle and provide and acquire resale certificates. Just like a home inspection, the broker has to be careful having an opinion about content. It's not their job to evaluate the association. So it becomes another good layer of liability protection for a broker to have a third-party independent person evaluate the condominium document package. So I found that to be really helpful for brokers to have just another resource. A lot of my new brokers, of course, love to use my service. I allow them to all sit in on the review as well. It's a good chance for them to learn. I think it depends on the broker. But they all, if I'm seeing over 90% of the time there's problems with the resale certificate, they need help sorting those out.
Yeah, definitely. So what's the cost for your service, Rebekah?
I charge $400 flat fee.
Okay. Yeah. And again, it's just like the best thing to compare it with is a home inspection. But it's on the condo side and understanding that condo now and what it looks like coming into the future. And what about timeline? When someone hires you to take a review at that, what does that typically look like, your time frame?
I have to move quickly. The state law gives a buyer 5 days to review a resale certificate. So I definitely do them within 5 days. So typically I can schedule within 24 to 48 hours. It just depends on when things come in. And I often meet on the weekends, and buyers have jobs and lives. So depending on their schedule, I'm really flexible with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I mentioned in your introduction, you do virtual meetings, and I also did a shout out about the reports, because I've had the privilege to come in your certified clock hour educator. So basically it means real estate agents need to have clock hours, continued education for their license. And it's difficult to go through the process to get certified with your content to be able to provide that. And you are, when it comes to condo and resale. And I thank you for the invite. You invited me in to do a little bit conversation on the financing end. And I believe it was a 3-hour workshop that you did. So share a little bit more about that in your education.
Sure.
platform?
I'm licensed by the Department of Licensing, so I can teach for clock hour credits. I focus on resale certificates. I do have to teach within an approved school. I've taught with several agencies that have their own school, and I love it. I really enjoy that part. I'm very big on how can I make this simple? And that's something I've really worked hard to do, building visual templates that are as simple as possible to convey all of that information and all those documents into one picture. If I could create an emoji, I would, but the best I can do is a chart.
And that's what I was going to do. You give a shout out. That's why I mentioned the continuing education. I forgot my thought process there and where I was going with it. Being in the presentation and seeing the charts and how you're able to actually line all these things out in a really easy to understand process was amazing. So we've got 2 minutes to wrap up our time here. And I want to ask you, what are you seeing as the biggest things that's happening out there with condos and the resale start that's preventing buyers from moving forward with their purchase because it's not a safe purchase for them to make?
Buyers are scared of special assessments, always, and they should be, unless we can fully understand that risk. I say it all the time, identified risk is the best. If we can see the risk and quantify it and understand it, great, we can accept that risk. But buyers walk away when there's too much unidentified risk. If we know there's a need to do some work in the future, but we have no idea how much it will cost or when it might happen, that's a lot of unidentified risk. If we know there's a project, we know there's a cost, there's a special assessment in place, that's really good identified risk. That's much lower risk because it's identified. Yeah. So I find that when I do these resale certificate reviews, the biggest problematic ones that people walk from is when they can't identify the risk.
Absolutely. And as a wrapping up time here and the importance of what Rebekah and her company and service offer, don't weigh on the lending because you may say, well, I'm getting a loan. A lender's not going to lend on a bad condo that's going to put me at risk. That would be a wrong assumption. Just like a home inspection, the lender doesn't know what's going on in the detail of that all the time with the property. It's only from the surface level that the appraiser is going to look. And on the resale, depending on your qualification, you may not need a full questionnaire. And if you don't need a full questionnaire to qualify for the financing end, then there's things that that can of worm is not getting open. And so with Rebekah and her services she provides, she is opening everything up so you know exactly where you're at. So Rebekah, thank you for the inspiration behind creating your company and bringing this into our industry. And I think it's going to be definitely something that's going to catch on for sure with buyers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina.